he follows the program, and it's really paid off well for him. Let's see, I think we got some questions here. No. Yeah, still no questions. With the app, my goal there was to kind of give you guys a lot of options on how to train and, based on the equipment that you have. The program itself is pretty straightforward and pretty simple. It's really 2 days a week, 45 to 60 minutes per session. It's designed to work with somebody that is doing a full-time training program on the bike. So it may seem like it's a pretty basic and easy program. And it is really basic, because the basics always work. You can go to the Olympics in pretty much any sport by doing squats, push-ups, and pull-ups. They've worked forever. They'll continue to work. There's not a lot of variety in my programming. We do a lot of the same exercises over and over, and that's on purpose. My goal isn't to entertain you with a bunch of crazy new exercises every week. I really want you to master the movements, and that's going to do a couple of things for you. One, it's going to make you extremely strong. Yeah, I can read the comments. All right, back up. So what do you suggest for 11-year-olds in terms of preseason conditioning? So I do work with a lot of NICA age athletes, so anywhere from junior high through high school. And for that age, it's really just about developing a foundation of strength. We're not getting super specific generally with the younger athletes. We're just trying to make them, introduce the movements to them and have them master them, so that they, have those fundamentals down. They develop those recruitment patterns, and we're doing a lot of kind of multi-joint big movements with our younger athletes. With the younger athletes, it's really important to keep it fun and keep it engaging, and make it more like play. Body weight movements are really good for younger athletes. Air squats, box jumps, push-ups and pull-ups. Lots of core. You can't really do too much core. Nobody in the history of the world has ever said my core is too strong or my core is strong enough. Core is something you can and should train every day. I'm not a big fan of crunching type motions, because they put a lot of potential shearing forces on the low back, and specifically like the L4, L5 region. And the best way to kind of rehab a bad back is to not hurt it in the first place. Trust me, from experience. I've got some really not so fun things going on in my L4, L5 right now. And it's from a lifetime of doing a lot of flexion. Being on the bike, you're kind of in a flexion state all the time. So doing things that are putting you in that state and under a load are eventually going to catch up with you. So for core work, I like doing a lot of plank type movements, a lot of anti-rotation things like Russian twists. Dead bugs are a fantastic exercise. Should I do the heroic warm-up before? With regards to the warm-up, I put the heroic warm-up in there as just kind of a way for you to kind of see what's incorporated in a warm-up. I encourage you all to find a warm-up that works for you and one that you like, because that's the one you're going to do. The whole reason for doing a warm-up is to get our core temperature up, get our joints lubricated, and get the muscles ready for the heavier loads that are going to come. So if you hate the heroic warm-up, find one that works for you. Do 5 to 10 minutes of progressively harder cardio, some body weight movements, air squats, push-ups, some like plank pulls or pull-ups, and don't do a lot of them. Just do like a set of 5 or 10, and then move into the main part of your workout, which is king, Tabata or HIIT training, or both. I kind of consider them to be kind of the same thing in a lot of ways. HIIT training is really, really time effective. it kind of gets a little more into the conditioning aspects, which, for the SAFE program, for the app that you guys are using, there's not a lot of conditioning stuff on there because I'm assuming you guys are all doing your conditioning on the bike, or if it's the off season, if you're Nordic skiing, running, ski touring, things like that. That's where you're going to get your conditioning. But I intentionally left conditioning type of things out of the program because I want you to save those kind of fun tickets for your on bike time. So your bike time is always protected. If you're going to cut anything out of your program in a week because you're busy or you're tired or you've got school or work or whatever, the first thing you're going to cut out of the program is your strength training, if that's the case in that week. Is this high school? Can I ask inappropriate? Sure. Let's keep it. Don't go totally X-rated, but there are some high school kids on here, so keep that in mind. Don't go too crazy. Separated left shoulder. The separated shoulder. Let that thing heal. There are some things you can do with like occlusion cuffs. So yeah, Andrew, hit me up later. We can go over that. But yeah, Monique, yeah, I figured. All right, I didn't recognize your handle, but Andrew, back to the shoulder. Take the time to let the shoulder heal, and in general with shoulders, let pain be your guide. So in other words, if it hurts, don't do it for now. Shoulders can be really tricky if they get really injured, and they're hard to rehab and they're hard to bring back. I would put that in the same category of back injury, rehabbing a back. The best way to rehab it is to not hurt it in the first place. Separated shoulders are a pretty common injury with cyclists, along with collarbones and things like that. So once you can do the work, doing a lot of shoulder work, like overhead carries that I know you're very familiar with, Andrew, are going to help you a lot. Doing simple things like just hanging from a deadlift, from a pull-up bar for like 30 to 60 seconds. And you don't need to do like a full hang where you're hanging from your total body weight. You can stand on a box and support some of your body weight with your feet or your legs. So it's actually better to do that because you can hang longer. Where in your case, Andrew, we're not trying to necessarily increase your grip strength by the hanging. It's more to get that shoulder capsule to elongate and kind of create some space in there so that your shoulder moves freely again. Let's see. So yeah, dead hangs do amazing things for shoulders, and it's something you can do as a prehab thing as well. We do a lot of shoulder work in the program to kind of toughen that, make that joint stronger and make it harder to break, actually. That's a big benefit of the gym training is just that durability aspect and making you tough, harder to injure, essentially. Particularly with shoulders, if you have a little more muscle mass and you have some strength there, it's going to keep that shoulder solid. Doing the weighted carries, like farmer carries, rack carries, things like that, are going to help strengthen those shoulders. Doing push-ups the way I show in the videos where your hands are directly below your shoulders and you're keeping your elbows close to your body. That's a very shoulder healthy way to do push-ups. You want to protect your shoulders because they're, like I said, they're really hard to fix once they kind of go south. Good news is shoulder separate riding, and I really don't have any lingering effects from it. They're super painful and they're pretty slow to heal. But they generally do make a full recovery unless you tear things like your rotator cuffs and things like that. Then they can be a little more problematic and a little harder to get back. Let's see here. Any other questions? I'm going to see if there's any. Yeah, it looks like they're just popping up here. So sorry, this is a bit of a learning experience for me here as well, guys. I don't. I don't do, this is the first one of these I've done. So thanks for coming on. Okay. TRX drafts want to do more than I'm not at WooCar. We post a whole body workout. Um, yeah, I can actually, yeah, Monique, I will definitely do that for you. I can set you up in the app, uh, for some TRX workouts as well on the days that you're not there. TRX or any kind of suspension trainer is a great tool for you guys. We mostly do it for plank pulls. But yeah, back. So the person that just said they separated their shoulder, still not able to do push-ups. That's fine. I mean, for it, if you can't do a full push-up, even just doing a push-up against the wall where you're standing up and just getting that motion back and doing it really gently, letting pain be your guide is a good way to start. Doing some light dumbbell, like chest presses where you're lying on the floor is a good place to start for, and just seeing what you're able to do. In most cases, whatever the injury is, there's always a workaround, and there's usually something you can do. And usually the worst thing you can do is nothing. Just movement is kind of the elixir of life, and it kind of is it's going to help you rehab whatever that injury is. I'm dealing with some pretty gnarly back stuff right now, and really the worst thing I can do is like lying down and sitting in a chair. The more I move, the better my back feels. And I made an Instagram post the other day. I kind of figured out that I can ride my trainer, and it actually makes my back feel better. Like I can ride no-handed, super easy. But I actually went and rode outside today, and it's, I've been really diligent with, kind of letting pain be my guide and finding out what I can do with my back. And it's really helped a lot. I'm pretty happy that I was able to ride outside. I've got, a pretty gnarly event coming up this weekend, which I'm still on the fence as to whether I'm going to do it or not. Based on today, I think I can probably do part of it, maybe all of it, because, just getting out and moving, and doing a repetitive non-weight bearing motion, my back really seems to enjoy that. Some poor judgment, cold weather. Yeah. Cold weather is, there's that old saying, there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing choices. And that's one thing that fat biking has really taught me is, you can ride in some pretty gnarly conditions if you layer properly and have the right gear. And, if you can keep your hands, head, and feet warm, it's pretty amazing, the kind of conditions you can ride in. Let's see what else. KAR. And I encourage you to, hit me up with any questions that you may have. Broke my femur. Ooh. So broken femur, that's a pretty gnarly injury. I would definitely clear anything with your ortho on that. The femur is potentially a really serious injury. Hopefully it wasn't a compound break. But you want to make sure that thing heals right. And, I'm definitely not a doctor. You want to check with your doctor or your physical therapist and find out what you can do, because it would be really irresponsible of me to tell you to go stretch, or do anything really with that, because that's a pretty significant injury. Best of luck to you on that. But we've seen, Chris Froome came back from a pretty gnarly femur break, and he's back racing at the highest levels. So, you absolutely can get back to it, but this is that's above my pay grade and above my expertise to recommend what you can do with a broken femur. Let's see. So principles, I'll just kind of go into, just talk about kind of general strength training principles with you guys that are on here. And if any questions come up, we'll detour and get into that. So one of the biggest things is, bracing your body. What's your go-to gloves for really, really cold? Okay. I use bar mitts on when it's really cold on my fat bike, but my hands generally don't get that cold, so I can, in most cases, get away with pretty light gloves. I've got some Castelli cyclocross gloves that work really well, uh, and I'll wear those in really most conditions until it's cold enough to need bar mitts. And even with then when I put the bar mitts on, I'll use really light gloves under those as well. Actually, even lighter gloves with the bar mitts. I'll use like a summer full finger mountain bike glove under bar mitts. Um, when it comes to feet and hands, it's, you really have to kind of try a lot of things and find out what works for you. With bigger gloves are generally better. Something that has a little bit of wiggle room in it. Because that airspace is what's going to keep your hands warm. Down gloves generally aren't a good choice because down loses its insulation properties when it gets wet, and my hands sweat a ton, so I never wear any down gloves. So anyway, back to like bracing. So everything comes from our core. So whenever you're doing any type of lifting or movements in the gym, where you're lifting anything up off the ground or moving anything under a load, being able to create a lot of tension in your core and still being able to move under that load is really a fundamental skill. And you do it on your bike all the time. When you're out of the saddle, sprinting or powering up over a climb, your core is super engaged. Your grip is tight on the bars, and you're putting all that power into the pedals of the bike. So whenever you do anything in the gym, always start with bracing your core and bracing surrounding muscle groups to support what you're doing. So like if I'm doing an overhead press, for example, a single arm overhead press, I'm thinking about rooting my feet into the floor and like kind of clawing the ground with my toes. My quads are flexed, my glutes are flexed, core is tight. I'm going to make a fist with my other hand. So everything is kind of braced and going into the movement that I'm doing. So the only thing that's going to be moving is my shoulder. Okay. With things like a front squat or a goblet squat, you're doing all that stuff anyway, because when you're holding that weight in front of you, you have to brace your core. I don't even need to give that cue because that weight is in front of you. And if you don't brace your core, you're going to put your back into flexion. You're going to bend, you're going to go too far, and you're going to potentially put yourself in a really compromised position and injure your low back. So bracing is super important no matter what you're doing. Even when you're lifting a light load, think about your movement, think about that bracing strategy, and just keeping everything solid and tight, because that's going to protect you from injury, but it's also going to make you stronger. You can try this on your own. Just go down and just do a regular push-up, and then after you've done that regular push-up, get to the top position, try to claw your hands into the floor, flex your quads, squeeze your glutes, engage your lats. Now do another push-up. You should feel like that push-up is much easier now when you're using that proper bracing and you're putting all that effort into moving your body as a single unit, rather than just using your triceps or just using your chest to do that. You're using all of the surrounding musculature to move your body in that case. Bracing is super, super important. Okay, so at home, you can get by with, pretty minimal gear. Maybe a set of dumbbells, like a 15 to 20 pound set of dumbbells. Maybe a little heavier set of dumbbells on top of that, and then if you have the budget, get at least one kettlebell. For high school age and younger athletes, a 12 kilo kettlebell is a good place to start. And for female athletes, so 12 kilo is a good kind of multi-purpose kettlebell that you can get a lot done with. For stronger guys, a 16 kilo kettlebell, you're going to be able to do a lot of work with. If you're going to get two kettlebells, a 12 and a 16 will go a long way, because with that, once you've mastered doing goblet squats with a single kettlebell, you can then rack two kettlebells. And I actually like doing double rack kettlebell squat with different weight kettlebells on either arm, because it loads you asymmetrically. And so you want to, so by doing that, it's going to force different bracing strategies for you. And it's going to put you, it kind of develops what I call that farm boy strength of being able to move under a heavy, weird kind of load. So, if all you ever do is like machines and bench press, and squat leg presses in a machine, you'll get really strong moving in a single plane of motion, but you don't get that bracing, you don't get that activation of your supporting musculature. Like, I'm at a loss for words here, but you don't have the activation in, in the balance. You don't have the stabilization going on, and you get a different hormonal response as well. They've done studies where they'll take subjects and split them into 3 groups: a control group, and then a group where they're doing super heavy leg presses, and the other group is doing heavy squats. And in the heavy squat group, they had a much more robust hormonal response in terms of their testosterone and human growth hormone to help repair the damage and get stronger after doing squats than they did from doing leg press. And the conclusion that they came to in that study is it was all these stabilizing muscles and the balancing that was going on that was kind of sending that signal to the body of like, hey, this is what we're going to be doing now. So we need to get stronger and we need to make the necessary adjustments. So big hit of growth hormone, big hit of testosterone, and ladies create testosterone as well. It helps build, that's what helps build muscle. And so your body will get stronger because of that. Okay, key points in the Turkish get-up. Really good question. So the Turkish get-up is meant to be done slowly. So the biggest mistake that people that are new to the Turkish get-up is at the start, they're lying on the ground, they've got their arm up, they've got that other leg bent, and then they try to make that first movement a sit-up. It's not a sit-up. You want to roll onto your shoulder, onto the elbow on the other side. So think about rolling your shoulder to the opposite wall while keeping that weight over your head. And then at each of there's some natural pause points in the Turkish get-up. So when you get up onto your elbow, pause for a second. Then go up onto your hand, pause for a second. As you swing that leg through and get into that split squat position, pause. Then you stand up and you do the same thing on the way down. So there's really natural stopping points where you want to stop, check your form, make sure that arm is straight up overhead, because that's the key to making Turkish get-ups effective, is keeping that arm totally straight. So there's 2 ways that really force that. The first one is balancing something on your fist. So like I like to use a shoe or something where you're doing the Turkish get-ups holding this the entire time. And that forces you to keep that arm straight up and down. The other way you can do that is by using a really heavy weight. I don't recommend that for beginners because your technique isn't there, and there's a good chance you're going to drop that weight on your head, which you definitely don't want to do. So doing light Turkish get-ups with balancing just a shoe on your fist, if you get to the point where you can do 3 to 5 of those on each side without dropping that shoe, then you're pretty accomplished at doing Turkish get-ups. But do them slow. Turkish get-ups should take you 20 to 30 seconds from start to finish per rep. So don't rush the Turkish get-ups. Be really deliberate and really mindful about your movements. I've got a video on the Wukar Fit YouTube channel that shows it, but there are some really fantastic videos out there on Turkish get-ups. I would recommend Strong First. The Strong First YouTube channel really breaks that. Strong First is the organization that was founded by this guy named Pavel Satsulin, who is credited with bringing kettlebells to America. He's a Russian master of sport, which is basically like a PhD in exercise physiology here in America. He's trained a lot of really top level athletes and military personnel, both here and in Russia before he came over here. But anyway, very, very good resource for all things kettlebell and strength training in general. A lot of the concepts and a lot of the things in my program are based on the Strong First system of training. So you can learn a lot by going to Strong First. But Turkish Get Up is a fantastic exercise. Like there's not a ton of them in the program, but that said, they're a really good movement for you to do on a recovery day. Like I'll do Turkish Get Ups. Like if I'm feeling sore or kind of stiff after a big day on the bike or a big day in the gym, I'll just do some super light Get Ups where I'm balancing a shoe or something on my hand and just work on going slow, work on that form, because it kind of gets every single muscle group in the body, and it's a really good active recovery tool for you guys to put into your routine. So there's only 2 days in the program on the app, but those other days of the week, you should be doing some core. You should be doing some mobility stuff, and Turkish Get Ups are a really good mobility exercise for you guys to work on as well. Really good for shoulders. So Andrew, do Turkish Get Ups, do really light Turkish Get Ups. Balance a shoe or balance a cup while you're doing those Turkish Get Ups, if you're still on here, Andrew. Kettlebell is a pretty amazing tool for a lot of different things. So we got way off track. That was I started that whole rant there or whatever on what to get for home. So back to that. So set of dumbbells, kettlebell, a suspension trainer is really nice. There we go. I think we reconnected. A suspension trainer of any TRX is kind of like the Kleenex of suspension trainers. They were the first ones. TRXs are quite expensive. There are other options out there that are much less expensive that do the exact same thing, but TRX is really nice. I have one. Actually, I have 2 of them. I have one at home and one at the gym. But there are other options out there. They are expensive in my opinion for what they are, but they do work really well. Foam roller, you guys probably all have that. Some resistance bands are good. Rogue Fitness has some really nice bands, and they're in stock. There's a hip circle, the Mark Bell hip circle, which you can get on Amazon. Those are readily available and they're cheap. They're like, $15-20 for a hip circle. And the hip circle is just a big piece of rubber that you put around your knees or ankles, and you can do like side steps, monster walks, things like that to get that medial glute activation. So things that you guys should be paying attention to that you're not getting on the bike. Obviously, all the upper body stuff. My program is pretty simple. You typically do a pushing motion and a pulling motion for upper body each session, but medial glute is a problem area for a lot of cyclists because we exist in what's called the sagittal plane. So our leg just does this, goes up and down hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions of times over your career. So we don't get a lot of activation of that medial glute. And what the medial glute does, it's the main external rotator for your lower body. So if you're sitting in a chair right now and you rotate your toes this way, your medial glute is what's allowing you to do that. So if you're ever riding behind somebody and you see their knee diving into their top tube, that's a pretty good indication that their medial glute is either not firing properly or is just weak. Same thing when you're doing squats. If your knees are diving together, that's a medial glute issue. There's a lot of downstream effects from having poor engagement in your medial glutes. So, take some time to, develop those. If your off season includes a lot of skiing, Nordic skiing in particular, your medial glutes are going to be really happy with you. But if you don't have that, if you're just a bike guy, which is what I am these days, I don't really ski anymore. I just ride my bike. I pay particular attention to my medial glute and keeping it happy and keeping it strong. Let's see what else. Any other questions that you guys have here? So for those of you that have the app, you've been happy with it so far. Actually, we don't need to go into that here. Does abduction help? Doesn't necessarily help medial glute, but it does help with just generally happy hips. Again, we don't do anything, we don't do any abduction. So there's abduction and adduction are basically moving your legs in and out. So monster walks are really good for adduction. Monique, side steps, Cossack squats, side lunges, those silly machines that they have in clubs where you bring your legs in and out like that. Those actually work really well. Clamshells with a hip circle is a really fantastic exercise, both for medial glute and adduction, because it kind of hits both of them. Fire hydrants, where you're down on all fours and you're lifting your rear leg up like a dog that's peeing on a fire hydrant. That's more of a medial glute thing, but it does get some adduction as well. But the resistance band stuff, like monster walks, side steps, those are going to be kind of your best friend for adduction. All right, what else we got? And Monique, we can go over some of these tomorrow. I know we are training tomorrow, Monique. If you're interested, we're going to do. Lena, yeah, you texted me earlier. We are training tomorrow, Lena. So I will see you at the gym. What else do we got? So, any problem exercises that you guys have come across in the app yet that you've got questions on, other than Turkish Get Up? Turkish Get Up, I realize, is a hard exercise to learn. So if anybody that's local wants to stop by the gym sometime and get kind of a little more of a deep dive in the Turkish Get Up, hit me up, email me at art@wucar.com, and we'll find a time and make that happen. So a lot of benefit from Turkish Get Ups. You guys will get a lot out of them. They're a really, really fantastic exercise for a lot of reasons. Let's see what else. So common mistakes I see. Yeah, you know what that exercise is, Lena. Common mistakes I see with this program is, trying to chase a number. We're kind of estimating 1 rep maxes with all of this. There's really no reason for us to be testing 1 rep maxes, like the deadlift and the squat and things like that, because the risk reward ratio just isn't there. It's super easy to get hurt lifting super heavy weights, particularly deadlifts and squats, if you're not really seasoned and really have the form dialed. So for our purposes, we want to underestimate what our 1 rep max is. And we don't want to be chasing numbers, because at the end of the day, you guys are training to ride your bike faster, or, just training to be a stronger human being for, whatever your day-to-day life is. Nobody's really going to be that impressed with your deadlift number, because, unless you're deadlifting 700-800 pounds, if you're a guy, that's what's considered really strong for a deadlift. And, I can count on one hand the number of people I know that have that kind of deadlift. We're, having a 400-pound deadlift isn't going to make you a better rider necessarily than somebody that has a 200-pound deadlift. Anything more than 2 times body weight is going to require a lot more specialization in your training and your programming. And for you guys, that means less time on the bike, more time in the gym. So if your sport doesn't require you to deadlift 3 times your body weight, you don't need to deadlift 3 times the body weight. If you get 1.5 to 2 times body weight deadlift, and that's estimated, then you're strong enough to pedal a bike. I've yet to come across anybody whose leg strength is the limiting factor in their performance on the bike. It's really a matter of accessing that strength that you have, and and to do that, you need to have proper bracing technique, and being able to access the biggest, strongest muscles in your body, which are your glutes and your legs. So if you have a weak core, if you have a weak grip, you're not going to be able to access the power that you naturally already have. A little kind of thought experiment that I've come up with to kind of illustrate that point is, if you've ever been in a leg press machine, you can put a lot of weight in a leg press machine and press that weight for reps. So for most people, they can put 2 to 3 times body weight in a leg press and move that weight. If we take that same amount of weight and put it on a barbell and put it in a squat rack, if you can even get that weight off the rack, if you try to squat with it, you're going to get really, really hurt really quick. And so we've just proven that it's not your leg strength that's the limiting factor there, because you can move that weight if it's in a leg press. You don't have the core strength to stand under that weight. You don't have the shoulder stability to support that weight. But more importantly, you can't move under that weight because you don't have that core stability. You don't have that core strength. And being able to move under a load is a fundamental skill. For what exercise are you using 15, Sky Bear? Okay, for cycling, what exercise keep shoulders down and back? Yeah, we're gonna do 1,000 meters. Yes, Drew and Andrew. Yeah, deadlifts are good for keeping the shoulders down and back. Farmer carries, all those weighted carries that we do, Monique, are good for that. Plank pulls, like that we do on the TRX, are fantastic for that. Any type of pulling motion, but really loaded carries are kind of your best friend for that. So doing a farmer carry where your shoulders are back, chest is out, and your shoulders are packed into the socket. So there's nothing passive about a farmer carry. You see a lot of people that'll do a farmer carry where their shoulders are shrunk down and they're just kind of hanging onto it. You want to pack those shoulders into the socket while you're doing a farmer carry. And there's nothing passive about it. You're squeezing that handle as hard as you can. You're actively pushing your chest out and pulling your shoulders back, and you're trying to make yourself nice and tall. Deadlift should light you up, first of all. Again, don't worry about the number for now, because right now, none of you guys have had this program for over a month now, so you're all still in your base, what's basically the base phase. So we're training your joints and your connective tissue to get stronger and get ready for the heavier weights that we're going to do. So deadlifts are really, right now you should be just really focusing on proper technique with the deadlift. So maintaining a neutral spine, getting a proper hip hinge, pushing the floor away from you and having your hips and shoulders move as one. There's some fantastic videos out there, to go through the setup for the deadlift. I need to record one for the channel. Proper breathing technique for deadlift. Good question, Lars. So for powerlifting, they will generally hold their breath for super heavy deadlifts. For what we're doing, we don't necessarily want to hold our breath for that. So I teach inhale on the way down, exhale on the way up, essentially. Doing a really hard breath hold under a heavy load like that, there is some potential for injury there. Powerlifters will do it because that's their sport, and they are willing to get hurt for their sport, just like we're willing to, ride a really technical, gnarly section at race speed, knowing that we could crash and we could get hurt, but it's our sport, and that's part of the danger and part of the risk that we signed up for in our sport. Powerlifting and Olympic lifting is a similar deal. They do things because it's part of their sport that I don't really recommend for cyclists and just, for general fitness stuff in the gym. If a full breath hold while you're doing a big movement like that can definitely cause some problems from, not to go too graphic, but go on YouTube and look at some deadlift fails. They're pretty bad. So in general, for all the lifts that we do in the gym, you're going to inhale as you're lowering the weight, exhale as you're pushing it up, and that's gonna serve you pretty well. Also, one thing that you can do that will really help that bracing is, like, using the deadlift, for example. You get down in your start position, and before you start, you give a little, and that's going to get your core just that much more tighter. And you can kind of prove that to yourself right now. Like, take your fingers, kind of dig them up under your rib cage, and just brace your core. Okay, and kind of pay attention to how that feels. Now we're going to do the same thing, and now I'll give a little, and you'll feel how much tighter that is. So, if you're training at Planet Fitness, they may kick you out. They may sound the lunk alarm for doing that little grunt, but it doesn't need to be super loud and super dramatic. Hey, Carrie, glad you could join us all the way from Alaska. Wow. Anyway, but that little grunt is going to get a lot more tightness in your core before you do any lift. And, even like a shoulder press, I'll give a little bit of on the first rep just to make sure that I've got that tight core going, because we also want to, being able to keep your core tight and breathe is a skill. And in strength training, they call it breathing behind the shield. This shield of muscle, essentially, but you still have to be able to breathe, and in some cases breathe pretty heavily and be able to use your diaphragm to expand and fill your lungs. And it's a little tricky to do that from while you're bracing, while you're maintaining that tension, and also being able to breathe. Nice, Carrie. So breathing under tension like that is a skill that you have to practice. So max lift sets, Lars. We don't really do, like, in my program, we really don't do 1 rep max tests at all. We'll do like a 3 to a 5 rep test, and I do those about every 4 to 6 weeks. Because we're just, we don't really need to know our absolute number, especially in the bigger, heavier lifts. If we're in kind of the right zip code for our purposes, that's good enough. It's kind of like, on the bike, it's better to slightly underestimate your FTP than to overestimate your FTP. You're going to get much more consistent training. A lot fewer failed workouts. So I always recommend erring to the side of a little bit lighter or a little bit easier. And then when you have those days where, you are feeling really strong, you can add a little bit more weight on those days. And then on those, and hopefully, if we're estimating right, on the days where you're just not feeling that great, you can still hit your lifts. And you can leave that workout, feeling like you accomplished something, because it's really kind of, if you overestimate your 1 rep max and you find yourself missing, not being able to hit the reps, not being able to hit all the sets, psychologically, that kind of messes with your head. And, you want to leave your workouts, feeling good about what you've done, and kind of building on that for the next one. So you're excited to come into the gym, and that applies to the bike as well. If you're overestimating your FTP and you're not able to maintain your wattage for whatever the interval is, at some point that's going to just break you down mentally. You're not going to want to go out and do intervals. You're not going to want, you're just going to go and just noodle around in your bike, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but from a performance standpoint, we want to be really accurate, with our estimations and make them attainable. And that concept of progressive overload increasing over time, it works in the gym and it works on the bike. It's kind of one of the fundamental principles of training. So really long-winded answer to that one, Lars. All right, what else we got? Yes, focus on efficiency. Yeah, so our bodies are really good at kind of making us focus on efficiency. I'll get to that, Drew. So what I mean by that is, we're endurance athletes, so we're pretty efficient as it is, because we're doing something repetitive for hours and hours at a time. Our body always will downregulate and look to things to be efficient. So that's why we do like the box jumps and that kind of fast explosive stuff, because that doesn't come naturally to cyclists. We tend to have more slow twitch muscle fibers, less of the fast twitch. So we're trying to elicit that response from our fast twitch muscles, because that's what's going to help us sprint. That's what's going to help us get through really techie uphill sections, for example. And for us to hit those, we really have to overload them. So that's why I really, really like jumping as a way to do that, because we can overload the muscles without putting a huge load on our body. So, we're doing heavy deadlifts, we're doing, relatively heavy squats, but we're doing those at a pretty low speed. So we kind of pre-fatigue our slow twitch muscle fibers by doing the squats and the deadlifts. And then when we jump into like a box jump, for example, or some of the single leg jumping stuff that I'm starting to do in the gym more, then we're really getting into that fast twitch muscle fiber. And so as endurance athletes, doing a 1 rep test for us is typically harder than somebody that's more of a fast twitch sprinter type person. But your body is always going to hold a little bit back. So in an untrained person, like if you do a bicep curl and you've never lifted weights before in your life, you're only going to be using about 18% of available muscle fibers to do that bicep curl. And your body will cycle through different sections of that same muscle. So even though we're using 18%, we're going to use a section here for the first set, maybe the first three reps. Then it's going to cycle over to the next set of muscles, so that we're using eventually the entire muscle, but we're not using it all at once. With training, we can get that efficiency up for most people to about 30% pretty easily. For like world-class tip of the spear strength athletes, like Olympic lifters, power lifters, they can get up to about 40% muscle recruitment. And that's about it for humans. For animals, primates, monkeys, and things like that, they're using a lot more available muscle fibers. That's why they're so incredibly strong for their size. And if you think about how they travel, they're swinging through trees with one arm and they're catching themselves. And, so it requires a lot of explosive strength. And so they don't have a whole lot of endurance. Yes, Carrie. Andrew's still in high school though, so no beer for Andrew, but yeah, pizza. So like cheetahs and things things that are really fast, antelope, they can go really quick for a really short period of time. Whereas humans, we can go for a really long time and relatively not very fast compared to animals. That's why persistence, if you've ever heard of persistence hunting, there's some tribes in Africa that still practice this, where they will just chase an antelope or, something like that, sometimes for days. And the thing will just fall over dead because they don't have that endurance, and their bodies will just shut down. You've probably all heard stories of, the story of the woman who gets out and lifts a car off of her kid. That's an example where that kind of evolutionary kind of safety mechanism and efficiency mechanism we have is bypassed, and you're getting close to 100% muscle recruitment that allows them to lift that car up. And that does happen. There are documented cases of that. What you don't hear about in those situations is that when they do lift that car up, generally they're herniating several discs in their back. They're tearing ligaments and tendons in their joints, because their joints aren't ready for that. Their back can't handle that much load. So, it's a bit of a safety mechanism for us. It's also why I don't recommend using straps for like deadlifts, for example, because if you don't have the grip strength to get that weight off the ground, you probably don't have the back strength to be supporting that much weight either. So your body's pretty good at saving us from ourselves, because we can override, and through just willpower, we can kind of make our body do things that it normally wouldn't do or doesn't want to do. And sometimes that's a really good thing, particularly in a really long bike race, like thinking like the ultra stuff where you're just going on and on for hours at a time. Every part of your body is saying, I want to stop, but you can override that and make it keep going. And some people take that to the extreme. There was a British guy back when I was racing a lot at the pro level, who was really into the ultra stuff, did a bunch of 24-hour races, and he ended his career early because he would just dig so deep in these races that his body eventually just shut down. Chris Eatock was his name, was a Trek rider. And, he had a really brilliant career, but it wasn't very long because his body just couldn't, he just went too deep too often. Caffeine and sugar is, that'll get you a long way down the road. Bonking's no fun. Caffeine and sugar have definitely saved my butt more than a few occasions, particularly in the longer stuff. I'm going to be doing a 200K fat bike race next week, so there'll be a lot of caffeine and sugar in my race kit for that one. All right, we're coming up on an hour here, so we're going to start winding things down. I got a question on YouTube. Andrew Locke, easily adjust. Yes, you can absolutely adjust the start date in the app calendar. Andrew, message me, send me an email, art@woocar.com, and I'll send you a link that shows you how to do that in the app. It's pretty simple to do, but it's not super intuitive. All right, so it's coming up on set. So any final questions? There's a new episode of his Dark Materials tonight that I'm dying to watch. So it starts at 7. You guys are probably sick of hearing me prattle on, but I'm hoping to do at least one of these a week. Maybe it'll be twice a month, but I'd like to keep this going because I get a lot from the questions that you guys ask me. It helps me make the program better, which is going to make you guys stronger. So, absolutely hit me up with any questions that you have whenever you have them. Email me. You guys have my phone number, text me. But my email, again, art@woocar, WUKAR.com. I want to hear from you guys. I want to hear a lot of questions. This isn't necessarily there's a lot of high school athletes on here, but strategy advice for newly initiated racing. So you guys have picked a really and it's a really awesome and very, very rewarding sport, but it's a super hard sport. So you have to fall in love with the process. You really have to enjoy just riding your bike, training for the sake of training. Because if you're just riding your bike for podiums and trophies, you're setting yourself up to really eventually, sooner than later, probably sooner, really hate the sport. Because I really can't think of a sport where you so consistently just get your head kicked in. Winning a bike race is a pretty rare thing, even for the best. Eddie Merckx was the greatest cyclist of all time in terms of wins, and he won less than 30% of his races. That means, if he lines up for 100 races in a season, he's losing over 7. He's getting beat in over 70 of them, and he's the greatest ever by a large, large margin. So find a way to just enjoy the process of training, enjoy the process of setting up your equipment, of learning the technical aspects of it, figuring out your nutrition and your sleep, because that's where you're going to get the ultimate reward. Because the reality is very few of us are going to go pro and be the next Nino Schurter or the next Keegan Swenson or Ryan Standish or whatever. It's a tremendous amount of work and dedication and discipline to get to that level. And then, there's a certain amount of talent that you need to have as well to get there. And it's really rare to find that combination in everybody. I mean, I've seen so many people that are, way more talented than Keegan that didn't go anywhere. Because they didn't have the work ethic, or they were just chasing results and only care, and if they didn't win, they weren't having fun. So find a way to have fun even when you're not winning. And when you win, it's awesome. Celebrate it, savor it, because that next win may be a long ways away. And if you get beat by one of your buddies that's never beaten you before, you should be the first one to go shake their hand and be happy for them, because, again, those wins are pretty hard fought and they're pretty hard to come by. So, be happy for the people that especially your friends, when they're beating you, be happy for them, because, if you've ever won a race, you know how great it feels and you know how much work goes into it. So, but, there's a lot more to racing than just winning. So, just have fun enjoy the process. And that's, yeah. I really can't emphasize that enough, actually, for all levels, whether you're high school or masters or anything. You don't want to be that person that's just miserable to be around when they've had a bad race. And I've been that person, trust me. When I was in my 20s, and if a race didn't go my way, I was not a fun person to be around. And it just sucks for everybody. I'm in a place now where wins are really, really hard to come by as an over the hill, never was. So, if winning was my only motivation, I would have quit riding a bike a long, long time ago. So anyway, that's my parting thought. Have fun, enjoy the process, and, ask questions. Don't be if you see somebody that's better than you or doing something better than you, don't be afraid to ask them why they're doing it or how they got there. Because, that's the other thing I see in cycling is, people are afraid to ask questions and they just assume things and just figure, oh, that person's just more talented than me or whatever. It's not always the case. They may have just figured out a better way to do things. So ask the questions. So anyway, thanks for tuning in, you guys. I really appreciate it. I'm really overwhelmed by the response to the app. And so thank you so much for trusting me with your training. And again, I want to hear from you. Ask me questions at any time, call me, email me. I don't want to give my phone number out over the internet necessarily, but if you want to talk to me directly, email me, art@wucar.com, and I'll send you my phone number and we can talk and we'll figure some things out. So anyway, thanks for tuning in, and let's plan on doing this next week. I'm going to be pretty much off grid. I'm going to be bivvying outside of Yellowstone on my fat bike, which I'm kind of terrified of, to be honest. Hopefully I don't get eaten by wolves. But anyway, I'm going to be gone really without internet or cell service all next week. But let's do another one of these 2 weeks from tonight. And I'll look forward to hearing your questions. Thanks, you guys.